After Effects is old, it's clunky, it's complicated, it's powerful, it's tricky to master. All of that is true. But it doesn't necessarily mean that's a reason to keep sleeping on After Effects or to be scared of the program. So today is the day that you are going to learn everything that you need to know to get started with After Effects and nothing else. And I promise by the time that you finish this tutorial, you'll be able to start confidently working on motion graphics projects of your own in After Effects. Hey, I'm Tom Graham for Envato. I'm a video creator and I've worked in After Effects for many years now. It took me a little bit of time to get slightly comfortable with the program. For all its flaws, After Effects is a remarkable program though, and once you do wrap your head around the basics, it can be very powerful, but it is tricky to master. Even people who look like they've mastered After Effects will tell you that they've barely scratched the surface. I have also barely scratched the surface. So don't expect to master After Effects in a couple of hours or from one tutorial, but do expect to feel at home making motion graphics of your own and definitely get ready to get creative. You're about to learn a bunch of things, all relevant to a typical motion graphics workflow, and I'll time code all of the main sections down in the description below if you do want to jump around. And I'll pop the working files to this tutorial down in the description as well if you want to open them up in After Effects and work alongside me. This right here is the project that we're going to be creating in this video, and you can see it covers things like working with shape layers, text and effects, animating these elements to give different weight and feeling via keyframe easing, composition of your frame and your elements within the frame, and how to time your animation to convey your message. Some tutorials will take a button by button approach, but let's take a learn by doing approach for this one. As we work through this animation and create it, you'll get to know the layout of After Effects, where all of the important buttons and panels are, and how you should look to structure your project. I'm not going to top load this tutorial with a whole bunch of settings. We'll learn as we create the animation together. Okay, enough talking. Let's get out of this park, let's get back inside, and let's get into After Effects. Okay, I sort of lied a little bit. We're still in the park, but we are inside After Effects. See what I did there? There's nothing particularly inspiring about a blank After Effects project, as you can see. It's basically a bunch of random gray panels by default, and that's the first thing you need to know about After Effects. It's a bunch of random gray panels. They're each important in their own right, however, they're not always needed, necessary, relevant, or useful to what you're doing in After Effects, but luckily it's highly customizable when it comes to the layout. You can see that all these panels around me are dockable, so I can pull them out, move them to other areas, close them, expand them, you name it. And don't worry about going too crazy either, because you can always really easily reset your workspace to its default settings by right-clicking here and selecting Reset to save layout. If you do want to create a custom layout, get everything sorted the way that you need it, and then go to Window, Workspace, save a new workspace, and then you'll be able to jump to that up here in the top when you need to. I have a few different workspaces laid out depending on what I'm working on in the program. For the purpose of this tutorial, you can stick to the default layout. It's pretty much how I've got it set up through the tutorial, and I'll explain any differences in my layout as we go. Now, as I'm recording this, After Effects 25 just came out. You'll see this is recorded in After Effects 24. It does pay to not immediately upgrade, especially from like a 24 to a 25 version when you're in the middle of a project. That's just good practice. So that's why we're working in 24 for now. If your layout looks a little bit different, that could be why. Disclaimer. So there's really four main panel sections that you need to know to get started in After Effects, and we'll get deeper into them as we start animating, but this is the overview. You've got your project and effects controls panel up here, your composition panel where I am, your timeline panel down below, and then over here on the right-hand side, you have what I sometimes think of as the shelf. I don't actually know what the technical name is that Adobe has given this section, but it's where the amalgamation of little panels tend to end up, kind of like a shelf or a drawer. Call it like the filing system. I don't know, let me know down in the comments what you call it, or if you actually know what Adobe calls it, let me know. At any rate, it's where you can add a bunch of other little panels like your properties, align tools, effects and presets and so on. And you can find all of these, by the way, up in your window menu. If you add one and it snaps to the top, you can drag it into the middle of the shelf area like so, and this will make it a little collapsible panel which you can open and close as you need while you're working on your project. This video is brought to you by Envato, the unlimited creative subscription. Get studio quality motion graphics templates for every editing program. Follow the link in the description and start creating now. So now that we've got a basic understanding of kind of where everything is laid out within After Effects, we can start to build our composition and create our animation. Now, the very first time you create a composition in a brand new project in After Effects, you can see here, there's a big button in the middle that says New Composition. So we can click that and we can create our composition here. Or because once a composition has been created, that button will disappear. If you need to create a new one, you can do so down here in the project panel settings with this little button here, which brings up the same dialog box. So we're going to create our main composition here. I'm going to call it Main Bouncing Balls.
And I like to just put main on there so that we know that's our kind of top level composition that we're going to be working in. And then we'll create some sub compositions within that, but we'll get to that in a moment. From here, you can set the parameters of your composition. So we're just going to stick with the preset 1920 by 1080 at 25 frames per second. You can go through here and select some other handy presets as well. And I'm going to make this one a 5-second composition. So I'll just put this here to 5 seconds. You can see this is actually hours, minutes, seconds, and frames as well. So 5 seconds in here. And for now, just keep your background color as black. We're going to create our own background layer. You can change this to something else if you fancy, but yeah, just leave it as black for now. So there we go. We've got our blank canvas to start creating our animation in. Before we get to adding anything down here into our layers, I'm going to just create some folders over here in our project panel so that we can stay organized throughout our project. And you can do that by right-clicking and going new folder. And I'm going to create a few folders here. So I'm going to do one called main comp. And then I'm going to do another one for subcomps. And I can, again, right-click, go new folder, or this little button down the bottom here creates a new folder as well. Subcomps, we're going to do another one called assets. And we won't be bringing in any external assets for this project because we're going to build everything inside After Effects so you can get a really good idea of where everything is within the program. But it is handy to have that there. And I will bring in a little color palette now as well, and I'll pop that into my assets folder, and I'll show you how we use the color palette in a moment. So there we go, our color palette's just sitting there. Let's move our main comp into the main comp folder, and then let's get on to creating our background here. So right-clicking down here, I'm going to go new and then solid, and that's going to bring up this dialog box for our solid settings. Let's just call this one background. It's going to automatically do the same size as your comp, so 1920 by 1080. Let's pick the color. I'm going to go for something that's basically white, maybe just slightly off-white, but slightly warm, maybe. It's, very, very, very slightly off-white. And then hit OK, and that will drop in. So now that's our background layer here. And if you turn that off and on, you can see that's our background layer. You can also toggle your transparency down here with this little button. We may not need it for this animation, but it's good to know that that transparency toggle is down here. And what that means is if we toggle our layers off here and you show the transparency grid, that means that this is going to be a transparent area of the video if you render this video out with transparency on. So the reason why you would do that is if we were making all of these animations that we're going to do over the top of our background, but then we wanted to export it without the background, and I'll show you all of this at the end, without the background, and drop that into, say, Premiere Pro or another editing program, and have that play over the top of other video footage or another color or anything like that, we can do that here. And that's why I like to create a background layer that we can toggle on and off, and then make sure that we can have that transparency running through the bottom. It's just nice to sort of be able to see everything that you're working with in the layer stack here, rather than relying on the background color here in our composition settings. Oh, and by the way, that's another way to get to your composition settings. You can do it up here into your main comp. You can right click and go to your composition settings, or if you've got the comp open, right click anywhere here and go to composition settings, and then you can change anything that you need. You can change the duration of the comp, which is handy sometimes, and you can change the frame rate and the resolution if you need, or even rename it. Plenty of options, plenty of different places to do things in After Effects. You'll note as well that once we've made our solid here, that solid has come up into our project panel, so that's our background solid there, should we ever need to access it for whatever reason. Now, the way I'm going to start building out our animation is to bring all of our shapes in and start to get a little bit of an idea of the composition and how everything's going to work within the frame, and then we'll move on to animating all of those pieces individually. So the first thing that we need to bring in is our couple of balls. So the way we're going to do that, you can either right click and go new shape layer, but there's an easier way to do it. If you go up here to your toolbar, you can click and long hold on this area here, and you've got your rectangle tool, your rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, and star tool. And if you hit Q and cycle through Q, that will get to your different tools. So if I cycle through Q now, you can see it's cycling through those. So let's get to our ellipse tool, and we're just going to drag out a circle here. Now you can see that's going to an oval shape or an ellipse shape. If I hold shift, it's going to be a perfect circle. So I'll hold shift and drag that out. And I'm just going to zoom out on my canvas a little bit here just to get a bit of a sense of the scale. And I actually want to make that a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to drag that out again. Let's go somewhere around about that size. Now we want the color of this to be different, and we've brought our little color palette asset up into our assets folder here, and we get a bit of a preview. So the way you can change the colors of your shapes is pretty simple. Once you have the shape layer selected, or before you draw the shape, you can do this. Up here, you've got your fill and stroke. At the moment, I've got the fill and stroke on. If you click on the words fill and or stroke, you'll get the options here, and you can either go transparent, so no fill, no stroke on either one. Or here you can do a solid color, then you've got a linear gradient and a radial gradient. We're going to select a solid color for the fill. And we're going to click on the little black box here, which is the color box. And I'm just going to color pick the background for this circle. And the reason for that is because we want this to move in front of our text layer and stuff later on. So let's just make that the same color as the background for now. And we want to create a stroke on this. I'm going to have a stroke width of 10, and we're going to have this nice blue color over here. So you would think that we could just use the color picker and go up here, but handily, I've got the hex code there. You can see the hex code for the color I actually want is 2D429B, but over here in our shape stroke color window, you can see the hex code is actually 4255A5, so it's actually different. So it is handy to be able to use the color picker, but the color picker tends to work a little bit more accurately actually in your composition window here. For any little assets and stuff that you bring in, especially screenshots and things like that, you want to make sure that you're actually using the hex code. So let's go ahead and type in that hex code now. So it's going to be 2D429B. And that's our color there. Now you can see our anchor point has gone to the center of our composition, not to the center of our shape layer. By the way, I'm going to use a few different shortcuts here, keyboard shortcuts. I'll try and call them out as I'm doing it. If not in the edit, I'll pop those up on screen. But to go back to my selection tool here, I'm just hitting V, and I'll do some other things like hitting H on my keyboard to bring up the hand tool. V is the selection tool, which means I can just move things around and click it and drag. And also you go back to V a lot to be able to select different things like your layers down here. So as I was saying, the anchor point here is centered to the composition, not the shape. If I just bring up my rotation properties on this shape layer using R on my keyboard, you can see here that it's going to rotate around the anchor point. Now we don't actually need to rotate this ball, but we want to do some squash and stretch with this ball later on. And we want it to squash and stretch from the bottom of the ball here, which would denote the ground. So we're actually going to move that anchor point to this bottom part here. But we're going to do that later once we do our subcomp. A good practice to get into, I find, is just to center your anchor point to your shape when you're making them. And that way, you know, for the most part, you're not going to get yourself into trouble when you do a bunch of different keyframing animations and then things sort of get a bit out of whack. So there's a really easy way to do that. Just right click on your layer, go to transform and go to center anchor point in layer content. And you can see the anchor point now has centered in there. And if we go to our rotation property again, I can spin it around and it's actually not spinning at all because it's moving around its center axis. All right, let's go ahead and rename that shape layer. So you can just click on that there, hit enter on your keyboard and then call it whatever you like. I'm going to call this left ball. And let's move on to making the right ball. Another little shortcut I've done there, which you'll see me do quite a lot actually, because I'm a bit of a stickler for having all of my layers closed up. Let's say I had the rotation property open of this and potentially the opacity property open of this layer. If you just click down here, hit Command A, and that's going to select all of your layers, and then double tap A, that basically brings up the anchor point property and then closes the anchor point property. And the reason why I do it with anchor point is because I'm already hitting Command A and then I just double tap A again. It's a really quick way to close all of your layers, and you'll see me do it quite a lot throughout this tutorial. So if you do see all my layers snapped shut at some point, what I've done is Command A, double tap A. Just one of those quirks that I've picked up over the years of working in After Effects. All right, so to create the right ball, we're just going to click on our layer here and hit Command D to duplicate, and we're going to rename that right ball. And we're going to move that over. And because I've got my selection tool already selected here, I can just move that over. And I want that to be about, you know, maybe half the size. And you'd think you could just click on the layer here and hit S to bring up your scale properties. And you can, but if I go down and shrink it to the size that I want and then zoom in here, you'll actually see that our stroke width has dramatically changed. And we actually want to keep the same stroke throughout, just have the ball a different size. So let's zoom back to full here. And we'll undo that scale property that we just did there. The better way to do it is to drop down this little caret here on your layer, go to Contents, Ellipse, and then Ellipse Path, and Size. Now we can scale it down to the size that we want. And let's just zoom out here a little bit. It's probably about this size. We want this to feel like a bouncing ball and this more of a ball bearing. And then I'll zoom in here and you can see that stroke width has still remained at 10 pixels. The scale property will change the stroke width, and the size property here within the ellipse path will retain the stroke width. All right, next up, we need to create our box here. So we're going to go back up here to our rectangle tool. And this time I want the box to be this pink color. So we're going to click on the stroke here, and we're going to make that EE4877. There we go. And I'm going to just drag out a box here, hit shift to create a perfect square. Do it around about this size, I think. And I'm also going to center the anchor point in this. Again, it won't really matter for this top level because we will pre-compose all of this, but good to just kind of get in the hang of it. Let's name this box. And then we're going to move on and bring our text in. So you can do that by right-clicking down here and going New Text, or up here in our toolbar, you can hit this T, which will bring up our text properties. Click anywhere to create a text layer, and you can see an empty text layer has been dropped here, and that will be called whatever you write in here. It brings up our text properties over here on the right-hand side, and we can just start typing. So we're going to call this bouncing, and I'm going to duplicate this so I keep all of the same size with our font and everything. So Command D, just drag that down, double-click into edit that text, and we're going to call this balls. And the reason why I'm doing this bouncing balls thing here is because with animation, I feel like everyone knows what a ball is supposed to look like when it bounces. It's easy to kind of understand the physics in a 2D sense like this. You see it a lot in examples of how to animate, and especially how to kind of get started in After Effects. And there's a reason for it. Everyone sort of knows what bouncing balls should look like. So we're going to do that, but we're not just going to see two bouncing balls. We're going to see two very different types of balls. One's going to feel a lot heavier and like look a bit more metallic. One's going to feel like rubber. We've got a box coming in. We've got some text effects and things like that. So you're not just getting the basic bouncing balls tutorial. You're actually getting something that shows, a little bit more holistically how to do everything else and how to make objects interact with each other. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get our composition set first, and then we can animate. All right, so I'm just going to bring this in kind of in line here with the U and the N, and then I'm just going to click on that, hold shift and drag down to keep that sort of in line there. That looks pretty good to me. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it on the N here. That works a bit better. All right, there we go. Yeah, I like that. That looks kind of cool. Actually, I'm going to have the box down low in the final composition, but for now, I'll keep it within our frame. The ball will sort of sit around here, I think, and this ball will sit sort of around here. All right, let's go ahead and organize our layer stack here. So we want the text to be right at the back. Then the box needs to be underneath the right ball, and the left ball needs to be above the text. So that's all good. What I want to do is I want to go through and build out our box a little bit more, and then we'll go and start to create some effects on the balls as well. So to do that, let's start pre-composing all of our shapes here. Now, pre-composing basically means you create a new composition from a single element. So for instance, this box, and then you can go into that pre-composition and build out all of the box layers without having maybe 6 or 7 extra layers in your main composition. It's a good way of keeping things nice and neat and tidy. So I may as well show you how to do that instead of just talking about it. So let's just right click on our ball layer here, go pre-compose, and we'll just call it right ball. And we'll do the same thing for the rest of our layers here. And we'll keep the text not pre-composed for the time being. We may change that later on, but for now, it's fine sitting where it is. I do want to change the colors of this up a little bit so we can see what's happening in our timeline a bit more easy. And you can do that just by clicking the colors next to each layer. So we'll keep the text the same color, and we'll make that maybe a purple. We can make the left ball fuchsia, why not? The box cyan. And the top one here, seafoam. Actually, cyan and seafoam are a little bit too close together. How about we go yellow? There we go. So now we can kind of see our background. Actually, let's make our background dark green. You can go a little bit crazy with changing all of your layer colors. That looks all right to me. All right, so this is our main composition. Let's go into our box subcomp, and then we'll start building that out. And before we do that, let's go here and make sure everything is nice and tidy. We'll bring our subcomps over into our subcomps folder and just hide all of these away to keep everything nice and neat. Now, a good way to navigate between your comps and subcomps is either to double click on this subcomp here. If I double click, it's going to open it up, and it's going to open it up in this little shelf down here. Or I'll just click out of this for now. Or you can hit tab on your keyboard and it will bring up this little map and it will show you all the subcomps that you can go to. So if I go into box now, it'll go into box and it'll open up down there. It's exactly the same thing as me clicking in between here, but if you've got a lot of comps and subcomps, it's really handy to just be able to go back and forward. So now that I'm in the subcomp, I hit that tab button again, and it will just take me back to the main comp. And this will come up wherever your cursor is.
Envato has the broadest range of artist-created assets, and with one subscription, you get access to all of them. We're talking millions of assets, including like 70,000 After Effects templates. So you're going to learn all the basics for getting started in After Effects in this tutorial, but if you do want to close that gap between the basics and some top-tier professional work really quickly, then don't be afraid to jump in and customize these templates. It's a really useful way to learn. Let's deviate from bouncing balls for a second, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is. Back to the computer. Want to make a cinematic title? Go over to Envato, head to Motion Templates, go into After Effects Templates, and look for a movie title, like this one. Perfect. Download that and bring it into After Effects. You can see how much work went into this template. It's very well laid out and easy to follow if you have a basic understanding of how After Effects is laid out, which you do now if you're still watching this video. Let's select the title that we like best. How about this one? We'll change out the text, soften the effects a little, and add some footage underneath. For that, we'll go back to Envato. Let's grab this little animated illustration. Back into After Effects, in the background layer, drag in your footage, drop the opacity, and bam, you've got a little title that you can render out, and it took, what, 2 minutes? Now imagine what else you could create with all of these templates and a little bit more time. To learn more about Envato and to sign up today, head to the link in the description below. But for now, let's get out of this park, back into After Effects to keep learning the basics. We've got a box to build.
All right, let's continue building out our box. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to call this one box front. And then I'll duplicate the layer, and this will be box back. And box back, we're going to drag out just a little bit like so. Put it behind. And I think it's going to sit something maybe like that. I think. Let's go back to our main comp and see what that looks like. Yeah, so this will be where it bounces, and it'll sit a little bit in front of that bouncing G. Perfect. Next up, we're going to do the top of the box and then the side of the box. Let's just zoom in here a little bit. So I've just hit H on my keyboard. I'm rolling in on my mouse here, or you can zoom in with Command plus, Command minus to zoom in and out. Now to create the top, I want to draw a box in here rather than create a box from a shape layer. So making sure that I've got nothing selected down here, because if I do it with this layer selected, for instance, it will draw it within this layer. I want to create a new shape layer. So I'm making sure that I'm just clicking down here so that nothing is selected. Going up to our pen tool, which is also G on our keyboard. And I'm just clicking in all 4 corners here to create the box top. Now you can see there are some sort of like sharp edges here, which I don't love. You can see there, sharp edges. To change that, we can go down, let's just name this box top. We can open all of these up and drop our little carrots down here, go into contents, shape, stroke, and change this to a round join. And I'll do that on all of these. Now you can see that you've got a nice round join here. So let's just go in a little bit closer and make sure that this all lines up the way we want it to. Hitting G on our keyboard to bring up our pen tool again, and we can just drag those little points. So H and G on your keyboard is kind of what I'm working with here to navigate around this space. Make sure this is all lining up the way I want it to. And it looks good there. And then I'm going to close the side in as well. So I'll make sure that I'm selecting down here so that nothing is actually selected. Clicking down here, sorry, so that nothing is selected. Going back to my pen tool and drawing in the side of this box. And I will also need to make that a round join as well. Let's just zoom in to make sure that everything has gone the exact way we want it. Hitting G on our keyboard to grab that path. H on our keyboard to move around. Back to G. H on our keyboard to move around. Back to G. A lot of G'ing and H'ing, especially if you're doing things like masking, actually, with the pen tool. Let's zoom out a little bit to see where we're at, and that looks like a box. And if we go back to our main composition as well, you can kind of see that has come to life in there. Now I want the front and the side of this to be a different color. The top is okay being white, which would be our sort of background color, or that off-white. So I'm going to click on, oh, before I do that, I need to name this. So we'll call this box side. So we'll click on the box side. We may as well start there. And we're going to make that the solid pink color here. So let's go to our fill and we'll make that a solid color. And then we'll pick that color. And we can use the color picker here because it's in our composition. It's going to pick the right color, E4877. And we're going to do the exact same thing on the box front. But on the box front, we're going to add our first effect. So over here on the right-hand side in this little stacky shelf thing, go to your effects and presets and search noise. Bring noise onto our box front, add 50%, and then we can see we've got like a nice noisy layer here. So that looks pretty cool. Oh, for some reason, I must have hit a keyboard shortcut here at some point along the line because I've snapped my layer all the way back. I think I did that with my left and right bracket. I did. There we go. You can just move that back in there. If I hit the left bracket, it's going to snap to my playhead here. So I'll do that. And I think what I must have done is hit the right bracket. Yes, I did. So to fix that, that's how you do that. There we go. I've left that in. I'm leaving that in the edit because this is something that you do all the time in After Effects. You accidentally hit buttons, things go awry. That's how you fix it. And don't worry, if you're learning as well and hitting random buttons, it happens to the best of us. So now I've got this little bit of noise happening here, but what we've lost is the box outline. Super easy to fix. Go to your box front, which is this one again. We're going to duplicate that. We're going to hit enter and call this box front outlines. We're going to go up into our effects controls panel, which is where our effects drop in and where you can change stuff like we did. We moved up to 50%. We're just going to delete that effect off there. And then we're going to make sure that there's no fill. So go no fill. And now we've got that box back around. And I'll just zoom in so you can see what I was talking about if you couldn't see on the recording. Let's play it through. That's what it looks like now. And without the outlines on, we were getting just this kind of like rough edge without the outlines. So there we go. Now I also want to create a bit of a shadow here as well with this noise effect. So again, clicking down here, making sure I've got nothing selected. I'm going to click my pen tool and I'm going to drag this in from quite far away. So I'm going to click down here, somewhere around about here. Actually, I'll drop that down so it's sort of in line with this. Click out here, down here, and down here. And that's just creating a little bit of a shadow. And we're going to create some shadows within our composition very shortly, especially with the ball and stuff. So let's fill this. We're going to go with a pink fill. And we're going to do 0 stroke. And we're going to add our same noise effect onto this layer, which we haven't named. So we're going to do that to box shadow. Crank that up to 50%. And then we're going to click on that and go T on our keyboard, which brings up our opacity parameters for the layer. And we're going to make that 70%. So shadows are not going to be as full on as the rest of our noise and stuff. And obviously we just need to bring that down to the bottom of our layer stack. And there we go. We've got a bit of a shadow. I don't exactly like the way this has happened here. So I'm just going to zoom in here and we can fix that. If I hit G on my keyboard, it's just going to bring up a little plus icon to create another grab point here. So I'm just going to do that and drag it up. So that way the shadow kind of pops out from the box where it should, not sort of like halfway through. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and fix this part as well. So hitting G on my keyboard to bring up the pen tool, that's gone to a feather mask. So hit it again to go to pen tool, making sure we've got the layer selected, just adding another layer, another little grab point there, sorry, and making sure it's right on the edge. Perfect. So now we've got a little shadow there. That will all make sense in context very soon. So let's go back to our main comp. And to be honest, I think it probably needs to go straight out rather than like this, but we're actually going to probably be moving this box down in the composition anyway, so probably going to sit like that, and that looks much better. So let's do that. We'll leave the box where it is now. So by the way, I've just done that by hitting P on my keyboard to bring up the position parameters, and I'm just dragging that up and down. Let's do it right at the bottom there. All right, next thing we want to do is let's work on this ball here and make it look metallic. So that's our right ball. We can double click on that, or again, hit tab and go through to our right ball composition. Zoom in here. Now, on our right ball, I'm going to duplicate that once and do the top one as right ball outlines. And the bottom one is going to be right ball effects. And the bottom one, I'm going to turn off the stroke. And the top one, I'm going to turn off the fill. I'm going to turn off the layer for the top one at the moment, just so we can see what's happening. And on the bottom layer here, the effects one, let's go to our effects and panels preset. Noise is already there, so let's drag that on. And we'll go to 50%. We're also going to do an emboss here. So let's look for, emboss, not emboss. And we'll bring that on. And you can see we're starting to get a little bit of a shape coming together that looks potentially like a ball. I want to put the shadow on the same side that we've created our box shadow. So it's like the light's coming down from here. And if I go back to our main thing, you can see light coming through, shadow on this side. And yeah, it looks pretty good there. I don't like the way the noise looks though with the emboss, sort of how I've got it. So what I'm actually going to do is change the layer stack here in terms of our effects, the way that they're stacked on. So I'm going to bring the noise below emboss here, which actually sits it on top. So anything that's below here is further up. It's all a little bit inverse. We've got some other inverse stuff as well when we come down to the graph editor. So it does take a little bit to get your head around. After Effects is weird sometimes. So this is our little metal ball. Let's turn our layer back on, the top layer. So we've got our outline, and we'll make sure we've got the bottom layer selected again. And let's just tweak this a little bit more to make it a bit more severe. Let's blend it with the original a bit more so it's not as harsh. And we'll just play ever so slightly with the way that shadow is going to go. Looks pretty good to me there. Back out to our main comp to see it in action, and we'll play it through. Obviously, there's no animation happening, but you are getting that noise. That to me looks like a little bit of a metal ball bearing. So that's effectively our composition. I want to move things around just a little bit more before I start animating because I just want to be happy with it where everything is sitting. It feels all a little bit cramped in the middle at the moment. I like where the box and this ball bearing is sitting, but I think I might want this left ball to be in a slightly different position. Let's say somewhere more around about here. And we'll call that sort of the floor where it's going to start bouncing, maybe around about here. And then with our text, let's just sort of make that around about here, but I want to make that a little bit bigger. So I've got both text layers selected here. Go up to character and you can just drag that to make it slightly bigger. And I do then just have to make sure that this is realigned the way that I wanted it. Let's zoom in here and click and hold shift to bring directly down. All right, and we'll just move it down a little bit more, somewhere around about here. I think is going to feel nice and good. And I'm going to move the right ball and the box just ever so slightly this way. There you go. That looks a little bit more balanced. All right, it's time to start animating proper. So let's make this fit to our screen again. We're going to focus on this left ball. Actually, I find it better if you just zoom out just slightly. It's not as easy for you guys to see it, but it's easy to get some context of where everything's going to be. Let's for now turn off our text layers and turn off our box and our right ball layers and just focus here on this one. Now, before when we centered our anchor point to our ball, I did mention that once we pre-compose it, the anchor point is just going to center to the composition, which it's done here again. So we need to move the anchor point where we want it for this top level composition. And we're going to do a little bit of what's called squash and stretch with this ball animation, which is when, as we get to the bottom of the bounce, it's going to squash down. And as it's going sort of through the air, it's going to stretch out. And to do that, we want to change the scale properties from the base of the ball where it's hitting the ground. Let's move our anchor point, and we can do that by hitting Y on our keyboard or going up to the pan behind tool up in the toolbar here, and just clicking and dragging that down to the bottom. It doesn't need to be precise, it just needs to sort of be in the realm of where you want the animation to kind of happen from. And because we're not rotating this ball or anything, we don't have to worry about it sort of like rotating on a weird axis. We're actually just going to be squashing the ball and stretching the ball like so. But we'll come to the squash and stretch in a moment. So this is where we want our ball to bounce from. This is our floor, so to speak. So let's open up our position parameters with P on our keyboard. Lots of P's there. And we want the first bounce to sort of be somewhere around 20 frames. Let's create our first keyframe, and we can do that by selecting our little stopwatch here next to the position parameter, and that will turn blue, and there'll be a little keyframe that's dropped in here.
Hey, so for those of you who don't yet know what a keyframe is, basically they're markers that we use to move between different states of our animation, or the keyframes of our animation. For instance, the beginning, middle, and end of a movement would be the keyframes of that animation, and then we animate between them with keyframes. Get it? You can keyframe a lot of different parameters in After Effects, some simple like transform controls, which is like scale, position, rotation, and so on, and some are way more complex, and you might find these in various effects. The magic really happens though in the way that you program the speed and velocity of the movement between your keyframes, what we call easing. But I am getting ahead of myself a little here. Let's continue to build these bouncing keyframes and we'll see the easing in action as we go on.
Now, because this position is going to be repeated a number of times through the bounce, we can just copy this with Command C and then paste it a few times. And ultimately, I want it to finish around about here, and I want it to bounce 4 or 5 times within. So let's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how many times it's going to bounce. And we want it to get a little bit closer together towards the end of its bounce. So the first couple of bounces will be a bit bigger. You can imagine this like dropping here, going boom, 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 boom. Weird ASMR again. That's sort of how it's going to look, but nothing's happened yet because we haven't changed the position. So if we go to the start of our timeline here, and I'm just going to drag this position all the way up so it's out of frame, and our ball is now going to drop from that first position to our second position, and that's how we do it with keyframes. There you go. So not very inspiring right now, but the ball is in fact falling to the floor. Now, how do we do the rest of the ups? Well, I find an easy way to do it, especially when you're just doing an up and down bounce here, is to copy this keyframe here where it starts, and then in between these two bounces, paste the keyframe. And that will give you the height of the previous bounce. And all we need to do now is drag it down a little bit. So let's say that's the height of the second bounce. Copy the second bounce keyframe, go in between, down a little bit, copy that keyframe in between, down a little bit, copy that keyframe in between, down a little bit more, copy that keyframe in between, down a little bit more, copy that keyframe in between, and down ever so slightly more. Now let's play that back. And that is in fact a ball bouncing, doing bigger bounces and then resting into smaller bounces. Let's just zoom in on our timeline down here, and you can do that just with the plus and minus keys. And let's even things out a little bit down here so it doesn't feel too compressed right at the end. Let's see what that looks like. Great. So then it comes into rest here. But again, that doesn't look very inspiring, and that's just because these are linear keyframes. So it's moving at an exact same speed from A to B. It's just going from here to here at the same speed with no kind of curve, with no easing, with nothing. Now, a quick way to get some interesting ease or some easy ease is to highlight the keyframes like so, right click on any one of them, go down to Keyframe Assistant and go to Easy Ease or F9 on your keyboard, and that will create easy eased keyframes. Now, if I go back to the start and play that through, it looks a lot more bouncy now, but it's kind of still weird. That's not how a ball bounces in real life. We all know how a ball is supposed to bounce, hence why you use bouncing balls as a good example of animation. So let's change these back to linear keyframes, and I'm going to do that by holding Command and then just clicking any of these, and because I had them all highlighted, they've gone back to linear keyframes. Now, there's plenty of plugins that you can use to get quick easing that will kind of get you in the ballpark of where you need to go. But I find it's good to know how to use the graph editor here in After Effects to get precisely what you need. And if you start learning it from right now, if you're a beginner, or if you're sort of just getting into animation within After Effects, it's just a really good skill to know. So I think you guys have got it. I don't think we should be scared of the graph editor. I was scared of the graph editor for a little while. I didn't use it for many years. I was like, oh no, I've got presets and plugins and stuff. But I'm a big graph editor boy now. Big graph editor boy. So over here on our position parameters, because that's what we've got keyframed, you can right click on the position and then you can separate the dimensions. And because we've not done anything on the X position here, just on the Y position, we can delete all of the X position keyframes. And so you can do that by highlighting that or just clicking here X position and hitting backspace. Now I want you to highlight these keyframes here and go into the graph editor. And you can see here, we'll get this kind of weird spiky line. And let's drag this up so we can see what we're working with. Highlight all of these, and this is your keyframes here. And then down in the bottom here, go to Easy Ease. So that's going to create that same easing that we did before. And I'll show you what that looks like now in the graph editor. So it goes blah, 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 blah. It's kind of just like easing in, easing out, easing in, easing out. But what we want, because the way a ball works is as it lands, it's going to go much faster up and down, and then it's going to be a bit slower at the top of the bounce. Now, the graph editor is inverse, like we were talking about with the effects controls earlier. So the bottom here is this part. The top here is this part. It's a little bit weird, but once you get used to it, it kind of all makes sense. So let's highlight all the top keyframes, which are in fact our bounce keyframes, and holding shift here so that we're not bringing the parameters sort of up and down. Holding shift, we want to drag in and create points here. So it's going to be very sharp. Then highlighting all of the bottom keyframes, which is actually the top of our bounce, we're going to hold shift and we're going to loosen these out. So we want, the way I see it is we want U's at the bottom and V's at the top, or inverse V's at the top. And you can see here, if I play through, that looks a lot more like a ball bouncing. You've kind of got this like ease in, doing, 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 doing. Again, weird ASMR. You're going to get that with ball bouncing animations. But that to me looks like a ball bouncing and how it's supposed to look. Much more than what we had there, which is our easy ease keyframes. And there you go. We'll play it again and perfect. Looks great. So now we can just go back to our timeline here, and I'm going to drag this down so we've just got a bit more room to play with. And you can see we have a bouncing ball. Doing, 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 doing. Lovely. But what we want is we want that squash and stretch that we talked about before. So clicking again on our ball here, hitting S to bring up the scale parameters. I'm going to unlink our scale parameters so that we can scale them in and out like that. If they're linked, it's just going to scale uniformly. We want it to be non-uniformly, like so. So hitting U on my keyboard brings up any keyframes that I've got in that layer. I want to go to where it's bouncing, and I want to hit, again, S on my keyboard to bring up scale. Let's create a keyframe there just so that we can do U on our keyboard and see both of those parameters together. And I want this to be about 80. So it's going to squash down about 80%, but the sides are going to stay at 100%, if that makes sense. And let's copy that across to all of our bounces. So just copy here, and our bounces are every second keyframe. That's why it's good to have all of your position keyframes open as well, which is why the U shortcut is really handy. So now you can see here, we've got all of our squishes, but we want our stretches as well. And the stretches are going to be opposite. So let's change that back to 100 and change it to 80. And copy those keyframes into the gaps. And there, and then we need one final one here, which will go back to its state, so 100, 100. Let's play that through and see what it looks like. So it's much more rubbery now. And that's your squash and stretch. You can see it's stretching there, squashing down, stretching. But it does get a little bit too jello towards the end, and then it snaps back, which we don't love. So instead of doing 80 and 100 at the end here, I think it looks good at the start, but instead of doing 80 and 100 at the end, we'll ramp it down. So we'll work backwards. So at the end here, instead of 80, let's go 95. And we'll do 95 for 4 keyframes. So that's 2 sets of ups and downs. Then we're going to do 90 and then 80. So I'll just go through and do that now. So that's my 95 keyframes done, and then I'll do 4 at 90. Let's play that through. So there, it looks like you have that kind of jello effect there, and then it settles a bit more because you're not getting as much squash and stretch through. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now we can see what it looks like if we go ahead and change these to easy ease keyframes instead of linear keyframes, and you can just, again, highlight all of those and do F9 on your keyboard, or right click and go to easy ease in your keyframe assistant. And I think it looks pretty similar, but maybe there's a little bit more personality with having the squash and stretched ease like that. So let's just keep it as that for the time being. And this is a really good moment for me to point out something that maybe you have noticed so far. I'm quite a way into this recording, 52 minutes, so it's probably a little bit shorter in the edit. Right up here, Untitled Project. I've not saved this project yet. So just go ahead and hit Command S and then save your project anyway where you need it. And don't be like me. Don't go 52 minutes into creating a project and not save it. All right, let's move on to animating our right ball and the box, and then we're going to come in and do some shadow work. So with the right ball here, let's press P on our keyboard to bring up the position parameters, and we're also going to click on our left ball and hit U to bring up those keyframes. Let's see where we want this right ball to start bouncing. I think somewhere around the end of our bounce here on the left ball, so let's say we want the right ball to drop then. So with the keyframes open up down here for this ball, let's make sure we set a position parameter for our base here, our bottom of our bounce. Again, we do that with the stopwatch over here. And let's copy that and go to when we want it to land. Let's say around about here. This bounce will be shorter than this bounce because this is a more, I guess, squishy ball, and this is this harder ball bearing style ball. So let's make it bounce maybe 3 times. Something like that. And we'll go through and we'll bring our position to the top there where it's falling in. We're going to do the exact same process as we did before, where we'll copy that first keyframe, paste in the second one and slightly drag it down. Copy that keyframe, paste in the second one, drag it down. Copy that one, paste it in the middle and drag it down, and copy that one and, you guessed it, paste it in the middle and drag it down. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so dung, 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 dung. I actually think I want it to bounce less, so let's just get rid of these last 2 keyframes. And I think that looks okay, but again, it's a bit hard to tell because we haven't done the easing properly yet. So let's do that same process again, and we'll highlight these keyframes and we'll go in and edit them in our graph editor. But again, because we haven't done anything with the X positions here, let's right click and separate the dimensions as we've just done, and then just delete our X positions. So let's go into our graph editor again, making sure that we've got the Y position selected, highlight these keyframes, make them easy ease, highlight the top of the keyframes, holding shift, and we'll make that V or the inverse V, and then highlighting these keyframes, holding shift and making, whoopsie, holding shift and making that U shape. Let's play that through. Yeah, that's it. Dunk, dunk, dunk. That looks way more metallic than this kind of like rubbery one, even though they're just shapes on a white background. Let's play it through. That looks like a little metal ball to me. And I think if you had some sound effects in here, like duk, 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 versus like boing, 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 again, weirdest ASMR, that would really sell this effect. So I'm happy with that bounce there. And we're not going to do any squash and stretch for this ball because it's supposed to be like a little hard ball bearing. So what we're going to move on to is shadows, because shadows will really sell this effect. I'm going to start with the shadow on this ball here. So let's go and open up the keyframes and make sure that we're at the bottom of our bounce here. And we're going to go up, making sure that nothing is selected here. We're going to go up to our ellipse tool again. And before we drag this out, let's make our fill color the blue color that we've been working with. And we can click here and hopefully we should just be able to eyedrop over here. We can. And make sure that we've got no stroke. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. And I want to make the ellipse shadow, I want to make it basically the width of the ball at its widest point. We're going to just drag that out about there, grab our selection tool, drag that down, and that's just going to sit just below here. And we'll make sure it's going underneath our ball, and we're going to change that to left ball shadow. Actually, for ease, let's just call it left shadow. And we're going to drop that opacity like we did with the other shadow to 70. There we go, we can see that shadow there. Now let's just zoom out a little bit and see where the shadow is hitting. So the shadow is going over this way, and if we turn this ball on here, you can see the shadow is going this way. So let's make the shadow a little bit off center, and we can do that by just hitting P on our keyboard and dragging it across like so. And there we go, that looks like the shadow is being cast down from whatever lights up here. Now again, this is obviously just shapes on a page, but getting your lighting right, if you've got some lighting directions, is super important. So just make sure you're being consistent. All right, so this left shadow here, I'm going to right click. I'm going to pre-compose this because we'll put some effects on within that pre-composition like we've done for the other assets. We'll go into that pre-comp and we're just going to drop our fun little noise effect on there because that's what we've been doing with our shadows. So grabbing our noise effect, bringing that onto the layer and putting that to 50%. And we can go back to our main comp here. All right, so as the position isn't going to change of our shadow here, it's just going to be the scale, we can hit S on our keyboard here and we'll create a keyframe for our base scale here. But actually, before we do that, let's move our anchor point right into the middle because we want it to shrink and grow from the middle, not from somewhere weirdly out here. So hit the stopwatch on scale to create a keyframe there. We're going to make sure that keyframe is the same as every bounce. So again, like we've done for the ball animations, let's just go through every second set of keyframes here where it's bouncing and make sure that our shadow is sitting where we want it. And then in the middle here, as in the middle of our 2 keyframes as the ball goes up, we want it to shrink, and it will shrink at a different rate compared to where our ball is in terms of the floor. So this is a little bounce versus this is a big bounce. So this will be a smaller shadow, this will be a bigger shadow. So the way we'll do that is we'll just work backwards here. So I'm going to just do this in increments of 10. I'll do 90 for this one, 80 for this one, and so on. Let me just go through and do that now. This one is 40, and then the first one will be 0. And let's play that back and see what it looks like. And as you can see there, we've got a little bit of anticipation with the shadow coming in before the ball, which is really fun. And then it shrinks and grows according to the height of the bounce. But it just does look a little bit off, doesn't it? It needs some easing. So you can go through into the graph editor and make this curve the exact same curve that we have done over here. But because it is different parameters versus, scale versus position, it can be a little bit tricky to get it exactly the same. So one plugin I do really suggest is Ease Copy. It's free or pay what you like over on AE Scripts. So try it out. And if you do use it as much as I do and love it as much as I do, go ahead and pay for it. It's worth every cent that you decide to give it. But effectively what it does is if you highlight all of these keyframes here, it will copy those easing values with copy, and then you can paste those easing values over here like so. And you can see if I go into the graph editor, that's the exact same curve that we had with these ones. Just a super handy, helpful kind of make your life easier kind of plugin. Again, like I said, we know how to do it now. We could brute force it, but it just speeds up your workflow. So let's watch that back and see what it feels like. Yeah, that feels a lot better now through that bounce. One thing I am noticing as we're going through and previewing this, and this is why you watch your animation back over and over and over again, is I don't like how long the ball is sort of holding in the air here. So let's just drag that sort of maybe around here. And what we're going to get then is this anticipation shadow coming in, and it's going to feel like the ball is falling from a lot further. And I don't know, there's something way more dynamic about that than having the ball fall like this and kind of hang in the air a little bit. So yeah, play around with things, move your keyframes around, see what works. I think this is going to work for me. Yeah, that looks great. All right, let's go in and create the exact same shadow here for this ball. So this is where we're landing, and we'll just zoom in a little bit. Click our ellipse tool up here. It should be all ready to go because we've just used it. And we'll create the exact same little shadow, and we'll drag that down to there. Actually, we're going to do it off center as well again, because this light coming through, like we've already discussed. We're going to call this one right shadow. Make sure that's dragged down below right ball. We're going to make that 70% opacity again. So hitting T on the keyboard to bring up your opacity parameters. And then we'll right click, go pre-compose, and we're going to do the exact same thing again, add our noise on there. So let's do that. Where are we? Right shadow. Effects and presets, noise, drop that on 50%. And back to our main comp here. You can see our shadow is there. So hitting S to bring up our scale, we're going to create our first keyframe there. But before we do that, again, pesky anchor points. Let's make sure the anchor point is sitting where we need to. Again, Y on the keyboard. Back to S here for our scale, creating a keyframe at the bottom, and then copying that over for all of the bounces. And not many bounces on this one, so that's okay. And then creating our middle keyframe here where we're doing, what did we say we're doing? We're doing 90. And we'll do 80 for this one. 70 for this one. And for this one here, we're going to move it maybe about halfway along and do 0. So again, we're going to get that anticipation of the keyframe coming through. So you can see the shadows coming. And again, we'll highlight this, copy with our ease copy, and paste the easing over onto our keyframes there. Doing, 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 doing. Perfect. Now, I want this box to move in from the right and then catch this ball as it's bouncing. And that's going to give us some interesting things to play with the shadow. So let's animate the box coming in now. So the ball has to land here. So the box needs to be in by that point. Let's go back a few frames. The box needs to land in about there. P on our keyboard to bring up our position parameters. Let's create a keyframe here where the box needs to land. Go back a few frames and just drag it out to the right. Play that back. It's a bit boring, hey. Let's highlight this and go F9 for our easy ease. See what that looks like. It's a little bit more interesting, but I really wanted to speed in and then come to a stop. So let's Let's highlight these keyframes, go back to our graph editor, and instead of using the value graph, which we've been using to this point, let's go to the speed graph here, and you can see it's just this line. So I'm going to copy these two keyframes, and then I'm just going to create a really steep curve in here, which means, well, you know, the steeper the curve, the faster the movement, the shallower the curve, the lower the movement. So let's play this back. It's going to come in really fast and kind of like ease in. Zoom. Zoom. Perfect. We love it. Let's go back and see what that looks like. Great. So now that we've got that box animating in, we need to work out this kind of pesky shadow that's happening here, because obviously, you know, in real life, that would be sitting on the floor here, not just floating in the air. So to do that, we're going to have this shadow here sort of snap in from the floor. The box will cover it for a second, and then it will just jump back to being on top of the box. So let's find out when it should jump on top of the box, which is just right here. And zoom in a little. We're going to bring up our opacity and position parameters on the shadow. So let's do P, and we'll just create a keyframe there, and T, and we'll create a keyframe there as well. Hitting U on our keyboard to keep all of those keyframes open. Let's go back 2 frames, and we'll find where it should be sitting on the floor here. So I'm going to bring our position all the way down, and we'll just zoom out so we can see what's happening here. So it's not going to be exactly in line with where this ball's shadow is, because the box is a bit more in the foreground here. So I think this will kind of work. We'll split the difference between the bottom of the composition and this shadow here. And let's zoom in on our timeline here so we can kind of get down to the frame by frame level. So this is where it starts, and then it's going to snap onto the box at the top here. But obviously you can see it's kind of climbing halfway up. So let's pretend this box is kind of obscuring it here, because you can see the box is like moving in front of where it would be on the floor in the background in this frame here. And we'll just drop the opacity to 0 in the middle here and have it come back to 100% on either side. So let's 100% on either side, copy that and paste that there, and then 0 in the middle. So it basically just snaps off for a second and then snaps back on. So that's the first frame, second frame is off, third frame is on, and we've found it back up there. So let's play that in situ and see what it looks like. And we've got the shadow sort of starting here. So we've got that bit of anticipation, and then it's snapping on top of the box here. So there we go. That's the shadow snapping onto the box there. So now that we've got these balls animated here, let's go ahead and work on our text. And then we're going to work out how to get the balls exiting the frame so that we can go back to our first frame here and have a nice looping animation. So let's turn our text layers on, and we'll just do that by highlighting both and clicking the eye there. And we'll work out how this is going to come on. And basically the way I see it happening is, I think as this ball bounces up, it's going to bring bouncing into frame. And as it goes back down, it's going to bring balls into frame here. So let's go on to bouncing first. And we're going to create a mask around bouncing. And we're going to do that with Command, Shift, and N on our keyboard. And that's going to create a mask here. You can see that's denoted by this yellow box. And if you did want to change the color of the mask here, you can do that. If you hit M on your keyboard a couple of times, it brings up the mask properties for that layer. And just next to mask here, you can change the color if you want it to stand out a little bit more from your background for any reason. So now that we've got a mask around that word here, we're going to drop this little caret down here and go to Animate, and then we're going to select Position. And let's go back here, and we'll find in our animation where that ball bounces. So it does its first bounce there, and that's kind of the apex of its first bounce. So that's where we want the bouncing word to come in. So we're going to create a position keyframe there, and we'll go back down to where that ball's cleared out, and we'll make that hide down like this. So it's hiding down behind that mask. So let's play that through, see what it looks like. So as that ball bounces up, it's dragging that bouncing word with it, which is pretty cool. The linear keyframes aren't really doing it for me, so I'm just going to highlight those and create Easy Ease keyframes again, F9 on your keyboard, or Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. And there you go, that just looks a little bit more like it follows the ball up. And now as that ball is coming back down, we'll have it reveal this word here, balls. So we're going to do the exact same process on balls, Command Shift N to create a mask, dropping this little caret down here, hitting the Animate tab and going to Position. And then we're going to work out where that's going to start. So bouncing comes up there, and I would say as this ball's falling down, we'll have this up like so, hiding behind that mask. We'll create a position keyframe there. And as the ball clears all the way down, we'll put this back to 0 to put the ball's word back in the middle of the mask. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, and we'll Easy Ease that. Let's play that. Nice. So bouncing comes up, then balls down. Now, I think the mask is a little bit harsh here. You can sort of see where that mask line starts. And we could do some mask feathering, and I'll just show you what that might look like here. We could do some mask feathering, but I don't really like the way that then sort of shows the word hiding behind the other word, and it could get a little bit messy that way. So instead of feathering the mask itself, I'm actually just going to add some motion blur to these two layers. And because this animation here is happening so quickly, a little bit of motion blur will cover that up. So you can just select both of these layers here and see this little button here where it's got like 3 little balls. That's our motion blurs tab. So let's just tick that box here, and you can see there we've got a bit of motion blur. Now we still have that hard line at the top, but let's play it back in real time and see what that looks like. Because that kind of motion blur effect comes on, you don't really notice that hard line all that much. Anyway, it's personal preference. It's up to your personal taste. I think this is going to work well for us. Plus it just shows you how to use motion blur on a layer there. All right, so we're pretty much most of the way through our animation now. All of our elements on the screen have been animated in some way, shape, or form. But I want to work out how we can exit all of these assets from the screen so we can get back to this base state and then do a looping animation. There's a couple of different options. We could kind of just do everything in reverse, but then you just have the balls sort of flying out in random order. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of break reality a little bit here. I'm going to have this box move up in the air, kind of throw this ball up in the air. It's going to hang for a little bit. It's then going to fly down. And let's imagine there's some sort of random black hole here because this little ball bearing is then going to fall from the roof, knock this ball out of frame, and then kind of drag the text down with it as well. So as you know, I've supplied these working files for you down below in the description of this video. If you do want to play along, maybe go from this point here where we've animated everything in and then kind of choose your own adventure, see how you want to animate everything out. And then let me know in the comments in this video of what you decided to do, how you decided to make this animation loop, or you can just follow along with what I'm going to do now. So let's start by dealing with this box and getting this ball in the air, and then we'll take it from there. We'll probably go over some of the same techniques that we've used so far in this video, but I might show you a few different ways to kind of split clips and kind of keep everything organized when it starts to get a little bit messy at the end of your animation. All right, so grabbing our box layer here, let's find where we want it to bounce out. So we'll play through. That ball bounces there, and I think around about here we want it to start, popping up. So P on our keyboard here to create a position keyframe. So that's going to be our start. Let's bump it up here, and obviously we're going to run into some issues here with our shadow. Don't worry, we can fix that. Let's have it hold in the air very briefly here, so we'll just create an extra keyframe there, and then we'll have it sort of fly out of the screen like so. Let's just play that back. So it sort of holds in the air, has a bit of anticipation, and then flies down. So before we go too far, let's deal with this shadow. So we want to go into this box subcomp here, but we want to split the shadow at the point in which it starts to deviate. So it's going to be here at this keyframe. So the beauty of subcomps is if I've got my playhead here, I can double click on this subcomp, and then that playhead is the same point in time as this playhead. So let's go in and we'll just zoom out so we can see what we're working with. And finding our shadow layer here, I'm just going to hit Command-Shift-D on my keyboard to split the clip here. Now, just for the sake of showing you what's happening here, I'm just going to drag this split clip away so you can see the shadow snaps off here. And to prove that this playhead in this timeline is the same in our main comp, let's go back there, and you can see it has now split off at that point. So to animate that shadow within this main timeline, I'm actually just going to bring it in here. So I'm just going to hit Command-X to cut that. And then I'll paste it in our main timeline here, Command-V, and I'm just going to bring it down below the box again. And it's moved around a little bit because of our box position has been moved. So we'll just move that back down to fit. There we go. And we can just make sure that that's in the right spot. So now as the box jumps up, the shadow stays on the ground, which is exactly what we want. We don't want it to be connected to the box anymore. It's been fine to have it connected here so far because the box hasn't gone off the ground. But as the box jumps up, obviously the shadow is going to shrink a little bit. So let's create some keyframes here with our scale. Let's put a keyframe at the start here and a keyframe at the top. And we'll make it slightly smaller there. We'll have that whole keyframe happen here as well. And let's just copy the easing of these and paste them on these new keyframes. There we go. Shadow shrinks a little bit. And then the shadow will fly out as well with that. So we can just keyframe this with our position on our shadow and look at the position of our box as it goes down here and just sort of follow that along. Nothing too crazy with that. So just make sure it goes in the right direction. And there's a little bit of parallax there. That works pretty well. And it's such a quick little movement that we don't have to be too precise with that. So I'm happy with that shadow there. All right, so now let's deal with this ball and the shadow. So as this box goes up, the ball is going to kind of float and hover in the air a little bit, then fall through the bottom of the frame. And then we're going to have it reappear up here. So let's look at where the box falls down. The ball's going to follow it to about here. And what I want to do is I want to split the ball clip, so Command-Shift-D. So then when this first ball falls out of frame, the kind of second half of it is a little bit easier to animate. We want to make sure that things aren't getting too messy, so let's go ahead and rename this one to right ball end, and we can even change the color as well. We want to make sure that it's nice and easy to see the difference between them. Let's also change box shadow 2 to box shadow end, just so we know what's happening there. So let's animate this ball out. With our box selected, let's hit U on the keyboard so that we can follow this little trajectory. P on our keyboard on our right ball, creating a keyframe there for when this animation is going to start, and then we'll make this one continue up a little bit further. See what that looks like. Then we'll have it drop down here just before we've split the clip. And we want it to just clear the frame as the new clip comes in. So that'll be round about here. So that clears the frame, new clip pops in. But this new clip's going to be over here. Just want this one to clear the frame and then the new one to appear. Now the new one's going to end up behind this ball. So we're going to drag this down behind left ball. And we're just going to go back and make sure that this shadow is going with this ball as well. So that's nice and easy to do. Go on the shadow here, bring up our position and scale properties. Create a position keyframe here. Have it float up with it a little bit like so. And hold there as well and then drop out. So let's see what that looks like. Of course, copy and paste our easing over. And we can see that the shadow just moves around on the box a little bit here. So let's just play with the keyframe just so that it can kind of stay on the box. That looks pretty good. It's going to move so quickly that you're not really going to notice. And I don't really like the animation of this little ball here. So let's make that nice and quick. So this is on our ball keyframe. On our position, we'll go into there, we'll go to our graph editor, and let's just zoom in here so we can see. Make this nice and steep, and then we'll make the back end nice and steep as well. There we go. So let's see what's happened there. So the box pushes up, pushes the ball in the air. The ball keeps going a little bit further than the box. And there we go. Now that shadow's just come off a little bit as well. I think that works. Nice. All right, so now we've got this ball coming down here. So let's play with that. So we're going to right ball end and we'll go to our position keyframes as well. So we've got this new position here, which is here because we've just moved the whole composition over, which is the beauty of a subcomp. And let's have that continue down so it drops and hits this ball, wants it to land on the ground. So the ball's going to drop down, knock into that ball there, and then going to continue on its merry way. Let's make sure that the ball goes all the way to the floor, as we've done there. But when it hits here, it's going to deviate. So let's create an X position keyframe here, and we'll move that ball over like so. So it goes boink from there. And we need to then get a little bit of a bounce happening here. So we'll create our Y position bounce base here a couple of times, and then we'll just make it bounce a little bit higher in the middle here. And this is all the same stuff that we've done before. And we'll continue from here to get the ball out of screen. So now you can see here, we're kind of getting this little like bouncy keyframe situation. Let's play that back and see what's happening. Yeah, it's not bad. We just need to do a little bit of easing on here, and we can copy some of this easing. This is very quick movements that's happening here. And this kind of stuff doesn't need to be exactly precisely perfect like the earlier bounces did, because this is a much slower animation and it's kind of forcing you to analyze what's happening here. Whereas this is a quick exit animation, so we can kind of get away with things being a little bit less than perfect. So as this ball hits, we now need to get this left ball to kind of exit frame. Let's hit U on our keyboard and create a position parameter there. And we'll also create a position parameter for our X position, just in case we need it. Let's go somewhere like this, so it just goes diagonally out of screen. And see what that looks like. So, boom, boom, and let's create some easing, and we're just going to copy what's already there. Doomph. So it's nice and quick. Boom, knocks it out of the park, and we'll make sure that that shadow is going to follow as well. Now, a really easy way to do it with that shadow is to just split the shadow clip here. So this is our left shadow. Let's split the shadow clip when this happens, and we'll call that left shadow end. And let's use this thing over here, which is called a pick whip. And basically what this does is creates a parent and child relationship, which means that the child follows the parent. So the left shadow end will be the child, and it's going to follow the left ball. So let's watch this. Bonk. As the ball goes now, so does the left shadow. Now, the reason why I've split the clip, because if we did that on this one here, it would, I'll show you. It would then move our earlier work with the shadow that we've done to not make any sense at all. So that's the good thing about just being able to split the clip at the end here, so that that shadow remains intact at the front of the animation here, the same way that we've spent all that time animating it. And then at the end, it just follows this ball out of frame. Then finally, we need to have another shadow here for this ball so that we're not completely breaking reality, and that's okay. We can just create one because we've done this 2 times already. We know that we can just quickly create another shadow here and have it follow this animation. So let's find out when that ball hits the ground, which will be this frame here. And we'll zoom in. With nothing selected, we're going to go up and get our ellipse tool, which still should have our fill and no stroke, which it does. Draw our little shadow here. It's the exact same drill that we've done before. You know what to do. We'll call this right shadow end. We're going to pre-compose it. We're going to go into that pre-composition. We're going to add our noise effect. 50%. And we'll go back to our main comp. We're going to make that shadow 70% opacity. And we're going to bring it down below our ball. Grabbing in a position there, pulling it underneath and off-centering it as we've done before. There we go, that's our new shadow. So we'll open up the parameters of our right ball end here, and then we're going to open up the position parameters for our right shadow end. We're going to split the dimensions, or separate dimensions of the position parameters here, because we're just going to deal with the X position for now. But before I do that, I want to move the anchor point again. I know we're late in the tutorial, but we're still working with the pesky anchor points here. So making sure that's in the middle so we can do some shrinking of this shadow as the ball comes down. Let's make sure we've got our X position selected here. Keep it in line with where this ball is bouncing. We'll create a keyframe here. We'll move forward to where this ball exits and create our further keyframe down here. Copy that data. So copy the easing data, sorry. Copy that and paste it across. And let's see if that sort of sticks with it the whole way. And it does. And I'm not going to worry too much about making the shadow grow and shrink for this little quick bounce, because it really is so quick. But what we do need to do is make sure that the shadow falls underneath this ball here. So let's go a few frames forward. So I'm going just 1 frame at a time. And you can do this if you've got page up and page down on your keyboard, another handy keyboard shortcut late in the tutorial. So hitting page up there just to go back 1 frame. Let's just drag our X position along underneath that. Again, 1 frame, our X position along underneath that there. And we're going to get some nice little double up here with the shadow, which is kind of cool. There we go. Now we need to make sure it shrinks and grows with this bounce. So let's hit S on our keyboard with this layer selected. Create a scale parameter there. And go here. Make it about 80%. And then go and look at where it's falling. and we'll call it about there. We'll call that 0%. Let's just see what that looks like. It's pretty subtle, but it is there. And again, because this is such a fast little ending animation, we don't need to be too precise with it. I think it looks, well, I think it's sellable. Finally, we just need to get the text out of here as well, and I think we can do that. As this ball falls down through this new reality that we've created, it's going to drag the text down with us, and we're going to hit the text onto the floor. Now, because we've got our text coming in here with our masks at the bottom here, I actually want to create new layers of the text as well, create the masks on the floor here, and you'll see what I mean. We'll have this all sort of disappearing into the floor. So again, to do that, we'll just split the text clips around about here so that we're working with new layers and not stuffing up what we've done earlier in the animation. So I've just done Command-Shift-D there, and you can pull this up so they're underneath each other. So it's labeled at bouncing to and balls to. Let's just do end so it's keeping sort of somewhat the same as the rest of the work that we're doing. It is getting a little bit messy towards the end of our animation here, but that's because we're starting to reuse some assets rather than rebuilding them completely. And I might go through and tidy this up with some different pre-compositions, but we'll see how that looks in the end in the final piece. Let's just get this text out of here for now. I'll just change the color of this so that we're working with something completely different. So as the ball comes through here, we want it to drag down. So let's go ahead and change our masks on both of these. So we'll do balls first and hit M on our keyboard to bring up our mask path here. Double click and pull that to the floor. So that's going to be the middle of this shadow here. And we'll do the same with our bouncing text, hitting M on our keyboard to bring up our mask, double clicking on the handle here, and then pulling this down to the floor. Selecting both of these layers and hitting U on our keyboard will bring up the position parameters for our animation that we've done earlier on. These keyframes are kind of mute now because we don't have any actual content in this part of the layer. We're only working down here. So don't worry about them. You can leave them there if you want, or you can delete them. It doesn't really matter. What we're going to do is we're going to create a keyframe for both of them just here. And as the ball comes through and hits the ground, we'll drag them down to the floor, and then we'll have them fade through the floor. And it will all make sense once we're going a little bit quicker. So let's just see what that looks like. So it's off a little bit. Let's just move these keyframes around so that we're keeping up with the ball. It is reality breaking, but it serves the purpose of getting the text off the frame and the ball out of the frame as well. So let's play back our whole animation now to see where we're at. And that's a nice looping animation. Now there is a little bit of dead space just at the end here once that ball clears the frame. It's not long, but it's because we've got a little bit of dead space at the front here as well. So what we can do, just as this shadow is starting to happen, we don't want to have it cut anything off, we can change our in and out points of our animation. Now you can do that by just dragging this point here, or position your playhead where you want it to start, and you can hit B on your keyboard for your in point, and find your out point, which is when this ball clears the frame just here, and we can hit N on our keyboard as well to create that out point. And now let's play that through. It should loop a little bit more seamlessly. There we go. Nice and seamless loop. Now, if we want to trim the timeline to this new in and out point, that's really easy to do. You can right click on this area here and go trim comp to work area. And now our composition is the exact same length as the animation that we've created. Now, at the very start of the tutorial, I did mention why we like to do the background as we've done it. Let's just say we wanted to go ahead and render this out without the background and have it lay on top of something else. It's so easy to do now. We can just turn our background layer off. As you can see, with our transparency grid toggled on and off, we'll keep it toggled on for the sake of this. All of our assets will animate over the top, and you could just drop that over the top of any other background footage that you want or background color. And to demonstrate that again, we can just right click here, go new solid, and let's just create a crazy, completely different background color and drop that at the bottom. And now we go. Now we've got a completely different background color that the exact same animation is sitting over the top of. I don't like this color. It looks a little bit too IKEA with the blue here. So let's delete that, turn our background color back on, and we can look to export this animation. So to export the animation, just make sure you've got the composition that you want to export selected either down here or in your project panel. You can go to your main comp. Oh, we need to tidy some things up here. Move those into our subcomps. You can select your main comp here or make sure it's selected down here and go File, export, add to render queue. And that's going to bring up your render queue here. Now, down next to the output module, you have a little drop down arrow here. I just want you to select high quality. High quality is going to be 9 times out of 10 what you need to export your animations out of After Effects in. You can do lossless if you want, and that will export a lossless file quality. You can also do a H.264 at a lower or kind of mid bit rate. But honestly, high quality or high quality with alpha has worked for me a lot in the past. It's just nice and simple. High quality with alpha is if we want to render it out without this base layer on and you want to render that transparency, like we just discussed before. So if I go high quality with alpha, that will render out without the background. But let's say we want to render it out with the background color that we like. We can go high quality and choose our output destination. And then over here on the right-hand side, just hit render. You can see that's rendering our animation out of After Effects.
Oh, we're back in the park. You made it to the end, congratulations. You know the basics of After Effects, and I believe I have given you all of the tools and skills that you need to get stuck into creating your first motion graphics by yourself. If you haven't already, make sure to grab the working files for this tutorial, jump in there and see exactly how I put everything together. You can start to pull it apart and customize it to your taste, and that will help reinforce the things that you've learned here. Why not start by changing out the colors and the fonts for this animation? Don't forget to check out Envato as well. There's thousands of high quality artist created templates for After Effects, and you can download any and all of them with one simple subscription. Now let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about the processes in this video, and I'll do my best to get in there and help out. And if anyone else has answers to those questions, jump in the comments as well. We're all friends here. And until next time, take it easy. Ease.